With the upcoming IndyCar weekend at Texas, there are rumblings that this will be the last IndyCar race at Texas for the time being, something that not too many fans are disappointed in. A lot of this disdain comes from the track's use of PJ1, which turned a must-watch race into a one-lane snooze fest. But was this entirely the PJ1's fault, or are there other forces at play here? And if we are leaving, where do we go? These are my thoughts on why IndyCar should leave Texas and where we can go. So I think a good starting point for this video would be 2017. Many consider this race to be the best in recent IndyCar history and the best at Texas Motor Speedway, and I can see why. Heart-stopping action from the start to the finish, and an A+ quote from James Hinchcliffe. However, 2017 would be the last year of the non-universal aero kits. The newer cars were sleeker but less racy on the ovals. As a result, in 2018, the on-track product at Texas was worse than the year prior, but still not bad. 2019 was better, as IndyCar had worked on the cars to make them racier, and it seemed to pay off. However, these would be the last of the good days, as for 2020, things would get rough. With the onset of the virus I can't mention by name, Texas, which at this point was desecrated with PJ1, would be the season opener for the 2020 NTT Data IndyCar Series season. This race was horrible, putting on one of the worst oval races I've ever seen. For a 300-mile race, it felt way longer, with barely any passing throughout the day. If you just grazed the PJ1 with your right side tires, you were going into the wall, and there was nothing you could do about it. The doubleheader in 2021 was even worse, with the only notable moments coming in Race 2 with the start crash and Pato O'Ward's first career IndyCar win. It's likely that this weekend's action isn't going to be an exception to that rule. With IndyCar having the potential to grow exponentially in the next few years, the last thing we need is a track that has poor racing and sees your series as a stopgap event. Texas Motor Speedway is more focused on stock car racing, not IndyCar. I say that because unless the Texas Motor Speedway executives are blind, they would realize that the PJ1 doesn't work for IndyCar and barely works for stock cars. They focus much more on the well-being of the NASCAR races than IndyCar, and I think that's the last thing we need for a growing sport. Also, look at the grandstands in 2021. That is miserable. The Texas market just doesn't seem to work for motorsports, because the only reason the NASCAR races at COTA last year did very well is because it's a new event. There's gonna be a lot of eyes on the inaugural edition of an event, but do those eyes stay for long? Texas once had a packed house for their races. Now they're lucky to get 50,000 people in the stands. There are towns in the middle of South Dakota that have a higher amount of people there than a race at Texas nowadays. It even makes you wonder how long it'll take before the fan turnout at COTA goes from impressive to embarrassing. In my opinion, the Texas market just doesn't work, and this event proves it. So I think leaving Texas is definitely the way to go. But what do we replace it with? The first track that should be a mention for a Texas replacement is definitely Homestead. The track is great for IndyCar racing in terms of on-track action and fan engagement. We have the opportunity to run an early spring classic in Florida during spring break. That's a deal that any race series should accept. You also have the opportunity to wrap in the colleges to bring some more fans in the door. If you show your ID for Florida State University, let's just say, you get half-price tickets for the race. That would be a great incentive program because not only would you bring race fans in, you can also have future workers for the series, teams, and the track. You have the opportunity to make a race that stands out from not only the NASCAR races at the track, but the rest of the IndyCar schedule besides the Indy 500. That's exactly what Iowa is doing for this year, refreshing an event with a dedicated sponsor and making a great spectacle of it. Now, one track that's also in the discussions to replace Texas is a Milwaukee Mile, a classic venue with a lot of history. It's the oldest operating speedway not only in the country, but the whole world. To return IndyCar racing here would be a win for the track, fans, and the series, because it's a track fans want to see again. If you look at the YouTube comments on the 2015 race broadcast, you can see how many fans want the track back. Another thing that this track has working for it is its vicinity to Indianapolis and the location of all the teams. With that, it wouldn't be too hard to have teams bring in extra cars to race there. As a race fan and a marketing student, I know damn well that 30 IndyCars on the entry list would put some asses in and some seats. Hell, if that was the case, I'd want to go there, and I live in Philly. That'd be a 13-hour drive that I'd be willing to take. Besides those two, there's a few other tracks that we could go to that I'll just rattle off real quick. Richmond Raceway was meant to be on the 2020 schedule. How about we bring it back for 2023? Pikes Peak International Raceway needs a race, and I'm pretty sure they'd be chopping at the bit for an event of IndyCar's stature. Maybe go north of the border with Sinclair Speedway, which hosted IndyCar back in the 80s. It would need a lot of work to get up to standard, but there's another one added to the list. The point I'm trying to make with this video is that IndyCar and NASCAR both have every right to leave Texas Motor Speedway, which is unpopular with fans, and produces the sport's biggest snorefest, and go back to tracks that deserve races because of their history and fan appeal, not the size of their wallet. Let's make this weekend our final race at Texas Motor Speedway, because from dwindling attendance to terrible racing, the track doesn't belong anymore. Anyways, thank you for watching, and have a great afternoon.